Police officer in a string of fatal shootings not charged in killing of a teen. And this is out of ABC News. And so I have a few things here that I've been observing. And protesters took to the streets in Wisconsin. Now, this is in Wisconsin on Wednesday after the Milwaukee County District Attorney announced that he would not press charges against the police officer who fatally shot a black teenager outside of a mall earlier this year. And so here you have a person that's shown in the photo. Okay, so Alvin Cole, who was 17, was fatally shot by, now I may not be pronouncing this correctly. It says Wauwatosa officer Joseph Mensah on February the 2nd. And the third fatal shooting of Mensah in the past it's the third fatal shooting in the past 5 years. So Milwaukee ABC affiliate reported this. So the prior shootings were ruled justified, but local civil rights activists have advocated for the officer's firing. Despite not pressing charges, the report did call for Mensah's firing by the police department. So the police department also released body camera footage from the shooting chronicling the encounter frame by frame. So Wauwatosa Mayor Denise McBride issued a statement immediately after the announcement, urged residents to remain calm after crowds had gathered near Milwaukee County Courthouse, given recent events in Kenosha, Louisville, and other cities around the country. It should be clear that we all must do everything we can to keep our communities peaceful. So violence is not the answer. It only impoverishes communities and brings more pain and despair, McBride said in a statement. So I asked all of the people, regardless of their viewpoints, to remain peaceful and calm as we work our way through this difficult time, he added. So we all must keep each other safe. So city officials implemented a 7 p.m. nightly curfew beginning Wednesday. So residents were asked to stay in their homes and stay home, and gas stations were ordered also to close. So here's, I believe, the teenager, Alvin Cole, who was 17, who was murdered. So late Wednesday, and I may not be pronouncing it correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong. It's Wauwatosa police declared an unlawful assembly and said that they had fired gas to disperse demonstrators who police said had thrown rocks at businesses. So Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers had mobilized the state's National Guard in the hours leading up to the announcement in the case of possible protests. So the National Guard and the police had established a perimeter around Wauwatosa City Hall, officials said late Wednesday. So all this is going on, like every city, every town, there's some black kid, there's some black man, there's some black woman are being harassed or arrested wrongfully and shot or killed by law enforcement, or something happens and the people are allowed to walk free, even if they have prior, now with this, in the case of this story, even if they have had prior incidences that have happened, this officer once again is allowed to walk free. So it goes on to say that he said that his office approved a request from local authorities for assistance and mobilized troops this week in advance of an anticipated decision. So they're awaiting a decision, which a lot of these decisions, when people wait for them, they already know the outcome is not in the favor of the people. So one of our core missions in Wisconsin's National Guard is to serve our fellow citizens and preserve public safety. So, MHA General Paul Knapp, okay, Commander Major General Paul Knapp, Commander of Wisconsin National Guard, said in a statement ahead of the decision, our citizen soldier and airmen live and work in the same communities all across Wisconsin and were well trained and prepared to assist our neighbors in any way we can. So while the Tulsa police said Cole fired a gun at officers before his death, but an attorney for the Cole's family denied those claims, citing video evidence and witness statements. Family members admitted that he had a gun, but said that he never pointed it at police. So an independent report confirmed that Cole was armed with a stolen pistol and that he shot himself in the arm before he was killed. So he was on his knees as officers surrounded him. The report said police told Cole to drop the gun before he was shot. So Cole never fired any shots at the officer. Mensah was the only officer to fire any shots, according to the report. So I believe here is pictured the National Guard troops to check their equipment at the Wisconsin State Fair Park. And so this is how it looks there, or how it looked like war was about to ensue, of course. So, excuse me, it's early in the morning, so usually I get these crackly voice, just waking up. And then too, we're closer. South LA is closer to the South Bay area, so they were battling the fires. And a lot of the ash and a lot of the soot and the air quality has been really bad. So it's affected people, how they are breathing or how they're dealing with this. And then we got the coronavirus, the numbers are starting to go up. And so there's a lot going on. And then we have the many protests and civil unrest events such as this one happening. And it goes on to say, at the time, Cole's firearm was recovered from the pavement of the parking lot, and there was a spent casing in the chamber of the gun. The district attorney's office said in a statement Wednesday, the loaded extended magazine was recovered from the inside of the sling bag, indicating that the firearm was only capable of firing a round that was in the chamber. So this meant that Cole, presuming he fired the one round in the chamber as he was running, did not have any more bullets in the gun at the time he was shot. So Mensah has fatally shot 3 men in the last 5 years and was cleared of both previous killings, according to the report. Mensah shot Jay Anderson Jr. 6 times in 2016 after he was found sleeping in a parked car. The officer claimed that he saw a gun inside and thought Anderson was reaching for it, and we've heard that story before many times, according to the police. And in 2015, he shot another man, Antonio Gonzalez, 8 times after he refused to drop a sword, according to the police. The independent report released Wednesday recommended that Mensah be fired because the risk of him shooting a 4th person was too great. Given Mensah's notoriety, people could bait him into shooting them, exposing the cities to lawsuits costing millions of dollars, the reporter said. So it also said Mensah violated policies preventing officers from speaking about pending investigations when he gave a radio interview and spoke about the shooting on a podcast in July. So he allegedly provided misleading information during the interview by failing to correct an interviewer who stated that Cole shot at him, according to the report. The decision not to press charges came amid ongoing demonstrations around the country Okay, people who have heard this story and are familiar with it, against police brutality in the wake of the several officer-involved shooting deaths involving black victims, many of them unarmed. So the police shooting of Jacob Blake in August 23rd in Kenosha, Wisconsin, less than an hour south of Wauwatosa, triggered violent protests and calls for police reform. National Guard troops were also called to Kenosha to deal with that demonstration as well. So those are some of the things that are going on right now, and so it's just sad. He looks like a kid. He was a kid, 17. So it's an updated family photo of Televia Cole shows her brother Alvin Cole in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Police officer Joseph Mensah shot and killed this teen outside of the mall February of 2020. So that was earlier this year. Sad. And so, and I believe this is an undated photo provided of Wauwatosa Police Department in Wauwatosa. And this is Joseph Mensah. And so even though he's black, he's an officer and he has been known to shoot people. And, so that's what you see going on. And so these officers, even black people who get in positions where we've noticed that sometimes they'll get in positions, they'll be police officers, and sometimes you'll see, and I've seen this, there'll be Republicans, and you'll see signs where blacks on blacks say blacks for Trump. We've often seen a lot of that going on where you'll see people who maybe they have a little more money or they get in a different side of the fence, and they sometimes can be even a worse aggressor against their own culture. And so it's sad because you would think that these people would understand that if you don't have your work clothes on and you were pulled over by the very same people that you work for, they would assume that you're doing something wrong and they would just as well shoot you and kill you as well. So you would think he would have thought that. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he knows that that city, they know who he is and they're familiar with him, and he feels like he can't face any kind of repercussions or race-based repercussions. So what I wanted to talk about in this video is, if you look at this woman here, this is a whole separate issue, and this is a whole separate issue. You look at this woman here. Felony rioting charges were dropped against Kentucky lawyer, a lawmaker. I said lawyer. She's a lawmaker. And so it says that her name is Annika Scott, and she basically was protesting on behalf of Breonna Taylor, and she was accused of setting a fire and unlawful conduct, in other words. And so the felony rioting charges had been dropped on Tuesday against this Kentucky lawyer and others arrested last month during the protest demanding justice for Breonna Taylor. So prosecutors lacked evidence to continue pursuing rioting charges against the state representative Annika Scott and 17 others in Jefferson County. Attorney Mike O'Connell said during an arraignment hearing in Louisville, Kentucky. So this is altogether a different picture. This is somebody who has a platform, who has power, who is trying to use it for the greater good of people of her culture. And yet she was ridiculed, and she was made to be thrown in jail. Versus this guy here, he's a police officer, and he kills. He has been known to kill, and he's black too, but he was let go. And so as long as he's killing people that look like him, it's fine. But if you're rioting, as they claim she was, and which wasn't rioting. She was protesting on behalf of Breonna Taylor. They wanted to throw her in jail. They wanted to accuse her for all these charges, on unlawful conduct, I believe, setting fire to a building or what not have you. There's more in there, but they had to drop those charges. Those were nothing but lies. And then you notice that when these people, when black people get in high seats or high positions, they have no trouble trying to pull you out of those positions. Here we have another incident that's altogether different. This is a vice mayor who was in Portsmouth, Black Virginia vice mayor facing criminal charges for calling the firing of a police chief. This was a big fight. And so they not only went after this woman, but they went after, I believe, her mother. I believe they went after somebody that she was related to as well that was in a high seat or position. So the destruction of the Conference Monument of Portsmouth, Virginia in June has caused so much tension that prominent politicians in the state are now being charged with crimes for their alleged involvement in the act. So that's what they're going after. And they say earlier this month, the Root reported that the state Senate Louis Lucas, the highest ranking elected black female official in Virginia, was brought up on felony charges for her part in this protest. Once again, it was another protest which ended in the monument being torn down and a citizen being injured in the process. And now a white Portsmouth resident has used an obscure law to go after the senator's daughter, who happens to be the city's vice mayor. So these people had high seats. So for publicly calling for the city's police chief to be fired. And so from the resident, Thomas Du Bois alleged that Vice Mayor Lisa Lucas Burke's public call for the firing of the city's police chief constituted a misdemeanor crime under an obscure city statute. Du Bois appears to have gotten the idea to press the charges from a Facebook group. So sheriff deputies delivered a summons to Lucas and Burke on Monday morning after Du Bois filed a criminal case against her with the magistrate judge. So in Virginia magistrate system, citizens can bring criminal charges against other individuals by making their case to the judge. So since the magistrate judge signed off on the complaint, Lucas Burke will have to appear in court to respond to the allegations that her political speech against Portsmouth's police chief violated the non-interference in appointments or removals provision of the city's charter. And so the document gives Portsmouth's Power City manager oversight over the hiring and the firing of city employees. And so it's really messy, really grainy, and it's really ugly. And so citizens are protesting against. They want these women out of these seats. And I feel like it's deeper than just the situation in and of itself. But look at these women. They're in high positions. They're black. They're the first black or female of anything there. And they are trying to get rid of them. And so the guidance on how citizens could charge Lucas Burke appears to have originated with Virginia Beach attorney Tim Anderson, who wants to oust Lucas from the office and accuse her of inciting, once again, a riot ahead of a monument destruction. Lucas filed a $20 million defamation lawsuit against Anderson, alleging he knowingly published false information about her and harmed her reputation. So Du Bois and other members of the anti-Lucas Facebook group have been accused of engaging in racist pattern of white opposition to black people in power. And so much of the criticism came after Virginia Pilot published a story detailing the pattern in the history of the majority of black city of Portsmouth. So Du Bois denies the claims of racism, citing the fact that the police chief and the other city officials are also black. But what we've known is many times they will use other black people against other black people to rival and on the opposing fence of issues. And so we've known this to be true even in politics. This has happened where you have black people that'll be the mouthpiece for Donald Trump, or they'll be the mouthpiece for somebody that's in a Republican Party that's a far right-wing extremist, and then they will say things against their own people of color to pretty much discredit black folks and to validate why they're a police officer and they're shooting other black folks and they're black themselves, or why they're trying to speak other black people who are protesting on behalf of the shootings and killings of black people, and they're trying to get rid of them out of high positions such as this. So if I didn't know any better, if I just woke up out of a coma, I'd watch that press conference and I would think we were living in a time that were 300 years ago. Du Bois said, Huffington Post reports, they made it sound like black people had no rights whatsoever. And yes, there's racism in the world, but it's nowhere near as bad as the people make it to be, he continued. So the race card is played way too much, and that's coming from one of the citizens that is trying to get rid of this black woman out of her position. He's saying that, but he's doing the opposite of what he's saying. And there isn't a race card. What we are faced with is civil unrest and injustice, and there is unequal treatments, and there's not non-fair treatment of black citizens, and it's not happening just in one city. It's happening everywhere. You can see it everywhere. And so this is not a race card. That statement is said way too much. So Du Bois, who maintains that he is only going after Lucas Burke because she's broke the law or the city charter, which is essentially the law, said that he only is being accused of racism because he's a white with a bald head and he looks like a neo-Nazi. And so that's crazy. But it's, there has been a lot of stuff that has been done against black people who they feel they don't want them in high positions. So they're waiting for you to take action and speak out on behalf of these killings so that they can find a reason to pin some kind of charges on you and get you put out of these seats. And notice it's done to black women. This is what we face, even in the workplace racism. And so when we go to college and we get those high degrees, or we get in those high positions of power, they're trying to figure out how to get us out of those seats. And so even if it means to make up a story or try to get you to do something against the law so that you can get fired. And then if you speak in your own language to where you try to converse with people of your own culture, or you empathize with them, you try to participate in public protests, and you speak out on behalf of the rights of people who don't have voices or they're not heard, somehow you are put up on a felony charge for rioting or for inciting violence or whatever it is that they can come up with to get you out of your position, because first of all, they don't like seeing you female and you black female on top of that educated in these positions. So they're going to try to do everything they can, no matter what your position is, to try to get you out of there, even if they have to use other black people to get you out of there so that they can basically cover themselves, because now they're cowards where they won't even come out. Some will, and some will just be overt, and others will hide, and they'll use a black person who they somehow pay them more money, or they use them temporary as I call them, like they use them as a mouthpiece mule to speak against other black folks. And that's what we have going on. We've seen a lot of that. And so to get you out of these positions, and this is a thing that has been happening lately. And so it's sad, but they dropped the charges on this woman, fortunately. I don't know what the outcome of this woman's predicament, Lisa Lucas Burke's going to be. So this article was out of the Root by Zack Linly. The other article, the one with Lisa Lucas Burke, and this one is out of the SF Gate, and this is by Bruce Schreiner out of Associated Press. Not August, but it was October 6th, so it wasn't that long ago. And this one is coming from ABC News 9 minutes ago. So this just happened. And you notice they didn't hesitate to show you the face of this officer, that he himself is black, and that you notice they didn't hesitate to say that he was in a string of shootings. So they want you to also realize that black cops shoot black folks. But the thing is that from what I've heard is that when people get in law enforcement is a whole nother world in and of itself. And so when you become indoctrinated in that world, you're either going to be on one or the other side of the fence. And so, unfortunately, I've heard that some cops go in, they want to remain good cops, and then they sometimes will be criticized by their fellow colleagues in those positions because they won't turn against people of their own culture. Then you have others who have no discretion about who they shoot. And what they do in those professions, and they go after people of their own background, and they have somehow have it justified why they did what they did, and they get away with it, and it's almost like they are wielding power behind a badge, and then now they have the access to firearms, and they can take lives, and they seem to go after the very people that look like them. And it's almost like self-hate, but in law enforcement with some of these individuals, so you have to be careful. It's not all black officers, but this one in particular was involved in that. And so because that's Mensah right there. And then I know some people might say, well, hey, Mensah, that sounds like a name from somebody that might be from out of the state. Maybe they're from another country. We have had some frictions with people that are African, and they may be from another country or another culture, and sometimes within our own culture we'll have divisions. And so sometimes they don't see themselves the same way as other black people here in America. And so sometimes that can have conflicts that will arise. Doesn't always happen, but it does happen at some point. So there's a lot going on here. And so this is sad, but I notice with black women in high positions in particular, this right here is not something I'm surprised of, because here, even in South LA, like in jobs, like I'll take teaching. You don't see very many black female teachers in high, positions. There's some, and a lot of them have gone to substituting. And they'll substitute for a while, but I notice what happens a lot of times if they don't get older and retire, they sometimes will continue to substitute or whatever to fill in where needed. But there are many jobs. It seemed like in the 90s there were more black teachers, but after the 90s and after the No Child Left Behind and a lot of the things started coming into effect, a lot of the smaller schools, the independent schools, seemed to just vanish. And what I know, I heard from some women who were entrepreneurs that owned their own home schools, where they had nursery schools or they had schools that were like Head Start type of settings or home care settings. Licensing would come in, and any little thing they'd find, they would just try to get rid of those people. Any little thing they find, they would give you a fine if you didn't correct the problem. But then after the fine, after you corrected the problem, there was always something else. Then they got persnickety about paperwork being signed. And so a lot of things changed over the years where you don't see as many black women who are running schools or who are in high positions where they get paid well and they're good at their job and they're respected. A lot of times they found ways to get them out of those positions and fired, and they are not working those jobs anymore. Or they were somehow laid off. or they can't find positions. And anybody that's making a certain amount of money, they question everything you do, what you do, why you do it, where'd you get your degree, where'd you go to school. And so it's hard for black women that are in these seats to even keep the seats in these positions. And so, but when it's white people in these seats, and I hate to be the one to say this, when it's people who are of Hispanic culture that look or appear to be white, or they want to be white, we've heard that term, they somehow will figure out how to keep them in their seats, and they will figure out how to get you out of your seat, out of your position, or they'll get you fired, or they're watching every move you make, or they're trying to document, or they're trying to say that so-and-so did X, Y, and Z wrong. And a lot of times they want to bring in their cousin, they want to bring in their auntie in those seats or those positions, or they want to see somebody white or white looking in those positions. And that is the truth. I'm just being real with it. So anyway, I'm going to let this video go. But what do you think about this? Is sad. And they use sometimes our own people. Sometimes they'll use people against us as black people. They'll create these divisions. You have people like, I think he's a Milwaukee sheriff, Clark. You'll have Candace Owens. You'll have like different people that are in politics to say things against people of their own background, to paint a picture of us as being criminals, or to find fault in us. And if we participate in public displays of empathy to try to combat some of the injustice, and they coin it as being a rioter, or instigator. And so even when they find out you haven't done anything, they have to make some kind of charges stick. So this woman now is facing misdemeanor, I believe 2 misdemeanors, if I'm not mistaken, for what has happened. And it's so sad because they're making her, painting a picture of her to be an agitator when she was really trying to support the Breonna Taylor situation. So Louisville, Kentucky, felony rioting charges were dropped Tuesday against a Kentucky lawmaker and others arrested last month during a protest demanding justice for Breonna Taylor. Prosecutors lacked evidence to continue pursuing the rioting charges against Representative Annika Scott and 17 others, Jefferson County Attorney Mike O'Connell said during an arraignment hearing in Louisville, Kentucky. Afterwards, Scott told supporters who gathered outside that the arrest would not deter them from speaking out for Taylor, saying that we will turn our protests into policy. And so she has unveiled legislation to ban the no-knock search warrants in Kentucky and impose new requirements on police practices. And so these charges will not stop us, so we will not stop the revolution, Scott said Tuesday before leading the crowd and chanting, "You can't stop revolution." So police had said that Scott was in a group last month that was ordered to disperse but failed to do so. So members of the group damaged multiple buildings, including setting a fire to a library, police said. And so Democratic lawmaker has called the charges ludicrous, telling reporters the day after her arrest that there was no way that she would have tried to damage the library because that was her own district. So during Tuesday's hearing, O'Connell said that there was evidence of the property damage to buses and libraries on the night of September 24th when Scott basically when Scott and the others were arrested. But he added, we would need clear-cut evidence that these individuals before you today were working with those who committed that property damage. The evidence we have reviewed thus far does not support that. So that's why she was cleared of that. Proceeding the rioting charges would not be a just outcome for these defendants, he said. So misdemeanor charges of unlawful assembly and failure to disperse are still pending against Annika Scott and the other defendants. So prosecutors need more time to review the charges, O'Connell said. So Scott said Tuesday that she and others will be back in court on the month to fight these bogus misdemeanor charges as well. So Scott was among hundreds of people protesting downtown Louisville, Kentucky, after the grand jury hearings into Breonna Taylor's death led to no charges of the officers. Okay. The police officers for the shooting of the black woman's apartment and the killing her during the a March drug raid. So a single officer was charged for firing into the neighbor's apartment, and no drugs were found in Taylor's residence. So Scott was arrested. Annika Scott was arrested as she had headed to a church that offered sanctuary for protesters. So Scott, who is black, has said that her arrest makes her more determined to push for her criminal justice legislation. So the measure, if enacted, would be called Breonna's Law. So she plans to offer the bill when Kentucky Republican-controlled legislature reconvenes next year. Another Democratic lawmaker, State Representative Lisa Wilner, has said that she's working on legislation that would narrow the scope of Kentucky's rioting statute in response to her colleague's arrest. So the proposal would protect people from being charged with first-degree rioting in their present, and if they are present but don't engage in the destructive or violent action. So just by you being there, they can't give you first-degree rioting or first-degree as if you burned something or you looted or you participated in violent acts. And so this is what is happening to this woman right here. So I want to let this video go now. But what do you think of this? Is sad, but this is what happens to black women who are in high seats and high positions. They're well educated, astute, and they're intellectual. They're able to meet in high places and deliberate and debate or talk about issues surrounding politics and social issues in their communities, but yet they find ways to try to assassinate their character and pretty much get them in a position where they have to worry about whether they're going to have a job, or whether they're going to have a career, even to ruin the women's careers. And so this is another killing of black women in the workplace, in their careers. It's not the physical killing, but it's the emotional and the mental killing of black women, females who are successful in their at the height of their career. And so simply for speaking out on the rights of people who are marginalized. So having said that, I'm going to let this video go. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening.